Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to today's stream of Lovecraftian Video Games. So, if you were with me earlier, you would have seen all of the problems that we've been having. The first 2-hour video that I did, there was a screw up with the audio that I did not pick up on. The game audio was just so much louder than me that it's difficult to hear me at times, especially during battles. And the second game that I started playing, I had the misfortune to have one of my episodes in the middle of the game, so I don't actually remember playing half of the game. And on top of that, um, yeah, I had an episode, so I just lost something like nearly 4 hours. It was nearly 4 hours. I am awake again, and I think it's time that we got started. So, as always, I need to do some of the housekeeping first. I'm streaming over Facebook and Twitch. Hello, people who are watching over either of those. If you want to talk to me, though, you need to jump over to Twitch, because that's the only way I will see your messages. But feel free to just chill on Facebook and watch. It's like, go for it. There is a survey in the description of this video, or at least there should be. And that survey, if you are familiar with Lovecraft's works and you want to help me out, jump on, do the survey. There's a whole lot of games there, some of which I haven't played yet, so I would love to hear your thoughts on whether you think those games are Lovecraftian or are not Lovecraftian, by whatever metric you measure it by. The other things is, of course, as always, all the music that I play for the intro comes from Falcon Shield, and it's all played with permission. And normally I can't promise if this will be a short stream or a long stream. But once again, given that I just came out of an episode, chances are I can do a long stream. It's now just a matter of, do I need food or something like that. So probably this will actually be a long stream as planned. Now, speaking of the plan is to do streaming pretty much so long as I'm awake all weekend. Today, tomorrow, if I'm awake and I'm able to stream, I am streaming. So, with that having been said, I think we should get back to the game. So we were playing Dagon, and while I open that up, I will just quickly show you. This is what I'm working on. I've talked about it in previous videos. You can probably watch one of those previous videos if you want, but basically the shorthand is I'm playing a bunch of games and working out where they fit in relation to if you could have a perfect example of a Lovecraftian horror game, what is, where do the games line up in comparison to that, assuming that such a thing is possible. But having done all of that spiel, I think it's time to try playing some Dagon. Now, are we capturing? Yes, we're capturing. Fantastic. Alright, I'm just going to move some things around my screen so that hopefully I can actually keep an eye on the chat, assuming it's working perfectly fine. Now, I could go continue, but what I remember is there was a bunch of little trivia things, so I found more than I thought. But I figure, now that I'm a bit more familiar with it, I might go back, start from the start, and we'll try and get more of the trivia. We'll try and knock all of it out, especially because I don't even think I got halfway. I think I maybe got, I don't know, maybe a third of the way through the game at best. So might as well start from the start. Starting a new game, yeah, we'll proceed. Let's go! Dagon is a faithful, interactive adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's work focused on story and atmosphere. You will not find difficult choices, action sequences, or inventory management here, and movement is limited to progressing through locations along with the plot.
I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more.
During the game, you will encounter interactive elements. Some of them will allow you to continue your journey. Others reveal interesting facts about the original short story, its historical background, and the author. So we have the circle, the elder sign, and these question marks. Some of the trivia is hidden. In order to find these secrets, focus your eyes and look for the elder sign. Okay. Before I click that, let's have a look around and see if I can... Yeah, see, right there. Right there. Lovecraft's letters. As to letters, my case is peculiar. I write such things exactly, as easily, and as rapidly as I would utter the same topics in conversation. Indeed, epistolary expression is with me largely replacing conversation. Actually, yeah. As my condition of nervous prostration becomes more and more acute, I cannot bear to talk much now, and am becoming as silent as the spectator himself. My loquacity extends itself on paper. Lovecraft to Reinhard Kleiner in 1917. Throughout his life, Lovecraft penned around 100,000 letters to his friends and fans, out of which only about 10% survive. But his tendency to endlessly correspond was of relatively late growth. In youth, I scarcely did any letter writing. Thanking anybody for a present was so much of an ordeal that I would rather have written a 250-line pastoral or a 20-page treatise on the rings of Saturn. Selected Letters, 1929 to 1931, H.P. Lovecraft. You can get those books at most university libraries these days. Lovecraft would often skip meals so as to afford postage. Collections of his correspondence have been published in various books, and selected letters can be found online. Some readers consider them his most important legacy. Not just some readers, some historians, people looking into the time period of the thoughts and ideas, and a few different things like that. He's one of the most prolific letter writers in history, which, yeah, like, he picks up a sizable spot for that alone. Also, of course, it's useful for understanding Lovecraft's belief systems and so on and so forth, which we're not going to talk about today, mostly because that is a conversation and a half. Yeah, it's Lovecraft isn't just a horror writer, he is also a prolific letter writer. So yeah, you can read the Discovered Trivia immediately or go back to them later. Yeah. Cool. Just checking to see if there's anything else. I'm assuming there's probably one of those almost...
Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below.
No. Oh, right, I forgot to give some trigger warnings last time. Sorry.
Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death.
Alright, let's see. Is there another... Yes. I don't see the elder sign there. Just the question mark. Alright, yeah. Morphine entered into use in the 19th century and was routinely administered to treat severe pain during the American Civil War and World War I. It was also sold without restrictions until 1914. Morphine became more popular after the invention of the hypodermic syringe around 1854. Friedrich Sertiner, I'm not 100% certain on that pronunciation, who first isolated the substance, originally named it morphium, after Morpheus, the Greek god associated with dreams. At the time when Dagon was published, morphine abuse, known as soldier's disease, was already a big problem in the United States.
It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider.
Yep, there we go. Lovecraft and the Great War. Dagon was written around a month after the United States entered World War I. Lovecraft was actively interested in its course. He composed many poems in which he gave encouragement to soldiers and commented on the events unfolding in Europe. He tried to enlist in the army, which he mentions in one of the letters to Reinhard Kleiner. Some time ago, impressed by my entire uselessness in the world, I resolved to attempt enlistment despite my almost invalid condition. I argued that if I chose a regiment soon to depart for France, my sheer nervous force, which is not inconsiderable, might sustain me till a bullet, until a bullet or a piece of shrapnel could more conclusively and effectively dispose of me. Reinhard Kleiner, Letters to Kleiner by Lovecraft. But even though he passed the physical exam, his mother prevented him from going to the war. She has threatened to go to any lengths, legal or otherwise, if I do not reveal all the ills which unfit me for the army. I am Providence, the life and end times of H.P. Lovecraft. Yeah. Some awkward facts about Lovecraft. In the early days, he supported Hitler. Later on, he would become a socialist, although his version of socialism was fascistic socialism, his own words there. And at his best, he ended up saying that he thought that Hitler was a clown, but he liked him. So, yeah, please do not, consider that Lovecraft was in any way a great dude. He was a good writer, but he was not a great dude at all.
The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation. So that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners.
Okay. The Huns were Central Asian nomads who established a dominion in Europe and invaded the Roman Empire in the 5th century AD. They were known as brutal, deadly warriors and masters of quick raids, who also developed powerful composite bows, lassos, and early siege weapons. During World War I, the British used the word Hun as a synonym for Germans in order to emphasize their brutality. However, the term originated when the German Emperor Wilhelm II gave a speech to his troops on the 27th of July 1900 before they embarked to China. Should you encounter the enemy, he will be defeated. No quarter will be given. Prisoners will not be taken. Whoever falls into your hands is forfeited. Just as 1,000 years ago, the Huns under their king Attila made a name for themselves, one that even today makes them seem mighty in history and legend. May the name German be affirmed by you in such a way in China that no Chinese will ever again dare to look cross-eyed at a German. It's quite a statement there. The refusal to take prisoners was a clear breach of the laws and customs of war adopted during the First Hague Convention of 1899, just not even a full year before that occurred. An interesting point of note is that it was talking about, this occurring early in the war. Obviously the war started significantly before America got involved, so interesting side point there.
So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time.
Okay, do we have... I remember not being able to find an elder thing here. Oh, I just heard a beep. I am clearly left something open. Sorry, give me a moment to find where the beep came from so that I can actually close it, because otherwise we run the risk of me having dozens of beeps happening There we go. Close the things off. Excellent. Sorry about that. Anyway, back to the game. So I don't see any elder signs on this particular image. Just check up in the sky. No? Alright, we're moving on.
When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator. Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight.
Okay, is there... I know that an elder sign is going to appear there in the next scene. That's to skip forwards. No, nothing in the stars. The stars are not aligned to give us an elder scroll. An elder sign, apparently. Okay. I guess we're going to continue.
The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land.
There we go. Alright, the return to short stories. Dagon was written in July 1917 and first published in 1919 in The Vagrant, an amateur magazine focused on the supernatural. The story is the first of his stories that introduced an element from the Cthulhu mythos, Dagon itself. A pagan, cult-worshipping Dagon later appears in The Shadow over Innsmouth, one of Lovecraft's most popular works. 1917 is also the year when he wrote The Tomb, a story about Jervis Dudley, a daydreamer who discovers a mysterious mausoleum in the woods by his house and becomes obsessed with it. These two works marked Lovecraft's return to short story writing after he burned most of his attempts at the genre 9 years prior and decided to concentrate on poetry. Lovecraft stated that it was his friend William Paul Cook, a literary publisher and critic, who convinced him to start writing weird fiction again. So, I actually really like this little tidbit for a few different reasons, one of which being that this is the first example of the Cthulhu mythos, but it's an interesting academic point in that it's difficult to call it that, because technically the Cthulhu mythos was invented by August Derleth, depending on how you want to discuss that academic point. So it's correct, assuming you backdate the concept of the Cthulhu mythos far enough back for it to count. But otherwise, yeah, that is absolutely true and correct.
But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue.
I don't think we're going to see any elder things in the sky.
The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous.
That is such a lovely... look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Like, just the animation? Like...
When at last I awoke, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Look at that.
For there was in the air, and in the rotting soil, a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish, and of other, less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity.
So this is actually around where my memory kind of stops. I remember seeing this, but I don't really remember what comes. I remember there was. I remember like a mountain or something on the horizon, but that's about it.
There was nothing within hearing, and nothing in sight, save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear. The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet.
Nice. Alright. Can we find an elder thing that is to continue? This really feels like somewhere I should see an elder thing somewhere. Oh, there we go. It's a cicada. The origins of Dagon. Dagon seems to be inspired by Fishhead, a short novel by Irwin S. Cobb about unnatural affinities between a hybrid idiot and the strange fish of an isolated lake, supernatural horror in literature, Lovecraft, and Lovecraft's dream about a strange island emerging from the ocean and him crawling in the ooze that covered its surface. I dreamed that whole hideous crawl, and yet feel the ooze sucking me down, in defense of Dagon, Lovecraft. Lovecraft's interest in the topic stemmed from his aversion to fish and sea smells. In his own words, "I have hated fish and feared the sea and everything connected with it since I was 2 years old, but I cannot recall what earlier experience gave me such a profound and lasting aversion to the sea and seafood." I might throw in here, because I don't know if... it probably will mention it later at some point, but Dagon is equated to being a sort of fish god of some sort in Lovecraft's works. Historically, it's very debatable. There's theories that he is actually a god of the grain. There is a largely dismissed theory that he's a god of the weather. It's pretty much dismissed, but it is a theory that floated for a while. The theory that he's a fish god is possibly the most prevalent, but it really doesn't fit. Like, there's clearly more to the god than fish, and like it's possible that Dagon is essentially an equivalent of Poseidon or something similar in that sort of a vein. Possible, probably not, but it's very reductive to just call Dagon a fish god. So, yeah, just kind of throwing that one out there in advance. I'm sure we will encounter some talk about that at some point, but I may not find the relative trivia point, so I'm just bringing it up now while it's still worth saying. Okay, let's continue.
As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions for which innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths. So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, straining my ears as I might. Nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things.
You can be the seafowl. Nope, let's continue. Do we have an elder thing? Oh, there we go. Nice. The mystery of volcanic islands. Volcanic eruptions sometimes result in the creation of islands. Most of them are transient and erode after some time, but some prove permanent. The floating pumice, porous rock created when superheated pressurized rock is ejected from a volcano, can move across long distances and transport barnacles and macroalgae, I hope that was correct, macroalgae, that cling to it. In 2001, rafts of pumice created during the eruption of a volcano near Tonga, Polynesia, eventually reached Australia. Huh, I didn't know that. That is kind of cool.
For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens.
That is so cool. Look at that. That's indicating the passage of time. That is so cool.
As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for travelling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue.
Here we have, that is the next thing. Do we have an elder sign? I actually really love this game design. It's actually hard to call this a game. I think this would actually count as a kinetic novel, which you could argue that that doesn't count as a game. But I mean, look at this. This is so cool.
On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease.
Okay, I've got to ask, how much food did he pack? Because, like, he spent several days out at sea. I think it was 4, and he spent at least 3 days sitting here, like this. Just like, he's had at least a week's worth of food, and okay,
The
let's
odour of
continue.
the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal.
That is to continue. Do we have an elder sign? No, it doesn't look like we do. No elder signs for us. Nah, I really want an elder sign for the squid. I just want one. I just want one. Transitions are lovely.
All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert.
Okay. Do we have any elder signs? Any at all? Doesn't look like it. I want something for the monster limb thing. It's a very beached whale. Poor thing. And a very whatever those things are.
That night I encamped, and on the following day still travelled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it.
Ooh, there we go. The Horrors of the Ocean. The creator of the Cthulhu mythos and the fictional underwater city of Relay was convinced that life could not exist at the bottom of the ocean because the water pressure would make it uninhabitable. Today, we know that the darkest depths of the ocean are home to peculiar organisms, many of them. The deepest dwelling fish we have discovered so far, the Mariana snailfish, can live about 8,000 meters, more than 26,000 feet, below the ocean's surface in never-ending darkness, and at hellishly crushing pressures, hundreds of times stronger than those found at sea level. Upon glancing at the modern photos of deep-sea creatures such as the anglerfish, the fangtooth, or the viperfish, and their truly Lovecraftian characteristics, it's hard not to find some irony in this. Interesting point of note is truly Lovecraftian characteristics. I'm not going to disagree with them because that is definitely one way to describe those creatures. But it's interesting seeing that as a claim of what the Lovecraftian aesthetic is. Again, I'm not going to say that they're wrong. I trying to remember what each of those look like, and you know what? I could agree with that. But it's interesting. It's interesting seeing that. I might actually have to take a look at each of those three and give it some thought, just generally.
By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance. An intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again. And in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy.
How much food did you bring?
Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence.
Nope, there we go. The loner. Contrary to popular opinion, Lovecraft was not an ever-frowning, eccentric, grumpy loner. He considered himself to be a person who appreciated humour. Moreover, he would often meet with friends in his apartment, or at various cafes in Brooklyn and Manhattan. At times, his social life was so intensive, his work would suffer for months. There was a point when he finally decided he needed to put an end to daily meetings and loitering in New York cafeterias and resorted to hiding at home and reading, with the main room light turned off, pretending he wasn't there whenever a friend knocked on his door. He also had another method of deterring his guests, which involved greeting them in a bathrobe, with an unmade bed visible in the background, and piles of paper scattered across the floor. The popular opinion seems to be pretty in keeping with this latter bit, except, yeah, there is the humor bit. But, yeah, I could see where that opinion developed.
I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me. But I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon,
Ooh.
whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost,
That sounds appropriate.
and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined.
Alright, do we have any Elder Scrolls? Elder Signs? I am so good at that word.
Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent, whilst after a drop of only a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual.
So it should be easy to get out of? Ooh, no.
Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps, where no light had yet penetrated. All at once, my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me.
suddenly getting vibes of 2001: A Space Odyssey.
An object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon.
Okay, that's the way to go forwards. Do we have any elder signs? Any at all? Come on, moon, give me an elder sign. No. No. Not at all. Okay.
That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself. But I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature.
Look, I can see people believing that, but at the same time, have you ever seen those gemstones that grow as perfect cubes? Or near perfect cubes? Or, like cubes overlapping each other? Like, it's amazing! I really want to learn more about how those form, but that is a natural phenomenon.
A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express.
Nope, that's going forwards. Do we have any elder signs? Any at all? Hey, I said it right that time. No elder signs. No. Moon!
For despite its enormous magnitude, and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith, whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures.
2001: A Space Odyssey.
Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely.
Oh man, I can relate so hard to that, speaking as an archaeologist, it's embarrassing how exciting a small piece of pottery can be. I remember once we dated an entire site based on a roof tile with a boot print on it.
The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures.
Cyclopean is such a nice and appropriate term. So that is some nice imagery, carving, reflection there. But do we have one of those elder signs? Sorry, I'm really excited by a game that just gives you these little tidbits of interest information, like a sort of director's commentary. I love it. I absolutely love it. I want more games. I want to make games that do this.
The writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me, and unlike anything I'd ever seen in books. Consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound.
So I find this really interesting. I'll get to that in a moment. But I find this really interesting because this is the first time I've actually felt a little jarred from the atmosphere and experience of the game. And that's because, look at these images. They are way too detailed for the term hieroglyphic. Like, that's the thing. It's literally like, if it was, just artwork or just, images of, that's fine. But the term hieroglyphic, has specific visual connotations, and this is not that. This is very much not that. Like, look how detailed these images are. This isn't in any way a question of could they have done that sort of detail, but like the detail of that there versus the detail of this here is so radically different. So yeah, this is the first time I've really felt my immersion kind of break atmospherically and so on and so forth. Having said that, I mean, I've been talking through most of this and treating it like a sort of documentary, so I'm not sure how the immersion is for anybody else watching. But now let's go. Storytelling methods. Dagon contains many themes and storytelling methods that Lovecraft developed in his later works, such as telling the story through carvings at the Mountains of Madness, the Nameless City, journals and characters' notes, The Shadow Out of Time, The Hunter of the Dark, islands emerging out of the ocean, Call of Cthulhu, or fictional beings and deities based on real events and mythologies, Migo in The Whisperer in Darkness. It's also considered the origin of the popular Cthulhu mythos. Some of Lovecraft's other stories also conclude in a manner similar to Dagon, but let's skip the details in order not to spoil the ending. So this is... Look, this is relatively true. I think there are other points that actually bear more weight than some of these ones that they've made. But this is true. This is true. These are... each of these points is correct. I just would have given it a different weighting of importance. Because there are some things that I've witnessed in this game and in the style and the themes that I'm like, yeah, that is an early thing of something that would become fundamental from about 1925 onwards. Like, you know, these are the things that define Lovecraftian style. And these aren't the most important parts of that, but they are absolutely themes and storytelling methods that he would develop later.
Plainly visible across the intervening water, on account of their enormous size, were an array of bas-reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of a doré. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto, or paying homage at some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint, grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer.
Yeah, look at those. Look at that detail. That is lovely. That is really cool.
They were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seem to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background. For one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself. I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe, some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born.
That's a hell of a lot of assumptions you've just made there, buddy. Again, I'm going to have to go back to the fact that my immersion is slightly broken, because what the text is saying and what I'm seeing in front of me don't feel like they're quite lining up. It was a bit earlier than what we're looking at in front, but it doesn't quite feel like it's perfectly lining up, and the details and hieroglyphics, so on and so forth, but it is lovely. I mean, look at that. Look at those images. That is still really cool. But yeah, the other thing is just like, you know, ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born. Like, you haven't got a good way of dating this, but that is still a hell of an assumption. Doesn't look like there are any things. Cool.
awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist.
I do like that actually kind of looks a little Vitruvian manish from a distance. I don't think that's intended at all, but I like that. Glimpse into the past beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist. Darn it, I want to be that daring anthropologist.
I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then, suddenly, I saw it. With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters.
That is such a cool effect. Look at that.
Vast, Polyphemus-like and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little.
So yeah, what I was saying earlier about, you know, certain themes and things that were more important, more prevalent. I think the madness is one of those, to be perfectly honest, and the way he writes madness. And I actually think that's a really important point. Lovecraftian madness makes an awful kind of sense. Sometimes legitimately an awful kind of sense, but it makes an awful kind of sense. It seems to be a psychological or emotional phenomena. There is a underlying logic there that can be at least partially, if not completely, understood. It's not simply, and he became a gibbering wreck and went bacon cheese. You know, like, and there are some later authors that do treat madness that way, and that irks me because that is kind of ableist. It's kind of like it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what madness is, and just treating it, you know, like they're a gibbering wreck, moving on, and the logic, like that sense that there is reason for the madness, that is a very solid thing that you get in Lovecraft that you don't get in a lot of other authors.
I believe I sang a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing.
Do we have anything? No? Pat the pointy thing. Pat it. Give it a hug.
I have indistinct recollections of a great storm sometime after I reached the boat.
How much food did you bring?
At any rate, I know that I heard pearls of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods.
Typo. Typo. Peals of thunder. Should double check if that's original.
When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital, brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing, nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe.
Yeah, that sounds like the experience of many disabled people right there. There we go. In defense of Dagon, in 1921, Lovecraft released a series of 3 essays, later published as a collection titled In Defense of Dagon, in which he rebuked a series of criticisms directed at his works. Some notable quotes: "I paint what I dream and will let the public settle the rest among themselves. Mr. Monday asks the raison d'etre of Dagon. I will give it purely and simply to reproduce a mood. Its object is the simplest in all art, portrayal. The physical horrors of war, no matter how extreme and unprecedented, hardly have a bearing on the entirely different realms of supernatural terror. Ghosts are still ghosts. The mind can get more thrills from the unrealities than from realities. In the essays, Lovecraft touches upon the topics of atheism, materialism, the quest for truth, and the love of science. Yeah, he writes about those things quite a bit. So that was that one. There was another one, yes. The journalist. Lovecraft was a prominent figure in the world of amateur journalism. In 1915, he started publishing his own journal called The Conservative, which included political and social commentary, poetry, short stories, and literary criticism written by him and other authors. Howard was a skilled wordsmith, but he also took criticisms to heart, which resulted in his decision to step away from writing poetry and concentrate on weird fiction again, for the first time since his teenage years. Dagon, published in 1919, is one of the short stories written during that period. In this example excerpt from The Conservative, the master of horror fiction explains his attitude towards warfare and the idea of world peace. Why any sane human being can believe in the possibility of universal peace is more than the conservative can fathom. Should the entire civilized world agree simultaneously to disarm, one or more nations would undoubtedly retain secret armaments and at the proper time take advantage of their more altruistic and less astute contemporaries in a wild career of conquest against unarmed victims. No country is, or ever can be, above warfare until the basic impulses of the human animal shall have miraculously changed. That is definitely a philosophical statement there. I'm not going to... that would be an interesting one to tackle, just conceptually. Which I have actually done before. I've had many conversations on that sort of topic. I actually did debating in high school, and that was actually one of the topics we had to deal with. So it's an interesting discussion. But we are going to move forwards. Nothing else?
Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god.
Yeah, what I was saying about Dagon, when Lovecraft wrote, I think fish god was the dominant interpretation. I'm not even sure the grain interpretation had been developed yet. It might have been. I want to say the grain one was developed first, to be honest, but I'm not 100% certain. But it's definitely the fish god version that became more popular much faster. Here we go. Excellent. Dagon, or Dagon, was the main deity of the Philistines, worshipped throughout the Middle East as the ancient god of fertility and crops. Yeah! In Hebrew, the word Dagon was a common noun for grain. The rulers of Akkad, Mesopotamia, chose him as the patron saint of their war conquests. He also appeared as the judge of the dead in a Syrian poem, and an underworld prison warder in one of the Babylonian texts. He is often mistaken for a fish god due to the wrong interpretation of his name, as in Hebrew the word dag means fish. In H.P. Lovecraft's works, Dagon is an underwater deity ruling over the deep ones, a humanoid race with fish traits that resides in the oceans. He is worshipped by a secret cult called the Esoteric Order of Dagon. Yeah, so this, thank you for covering those points. I was relaying information from memory, and this definitely fits, generally speaking. Oh, that's right. Fun little fact about the Philistines. So, we've been able to trace the Philistines back, historically and archaeologically, to the Sea Peoples. And the Sea Peoples, we've been able to trace back to the Mycenaeans, so ancient Greece, Bronze Age Greece, southern Italy, the islands of Sardinia and Corsica, Sicily. Like, it's really fascinating, the information we've got now, but I love, because I know it's been published on, I'm not sure where, but when I learned about it, it hadn't been published yet. One of the key reasons why we know all of this now and can trace all of this is there's a particular type of helmet made out of boar's tusks, which is, for most of history, it exclusively occurs in Mycenaean Greece, in Bronze Age Greece. The only other place where it turns up is with the Philistines. So it's an exclusive feature of Bronze Age Greek culture and armaments and equipment and fashion and expression, and it appears with the Philistines very briefly, but it appears with them as well. So, most importantly, the Philistines existed after the Mycenaeans did, so they couldn't have really traded for it, not as far as we understand. So, yeah, just a lovely little point there. Do we have another thing to click on? Where's the... Oh, there's the circle. Cool. Looks like a reflection of a person there. That is... Actually, I'm sure that is intentional. That looks really cool. Gives that slight haunting vibe of being watched.
But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries.
Hopelessly conventional has the Necronomicon sitting right there? I don't think so, unless that's mine. But I don't think so. August Derleth in the Cthulhu Mythos. Oh, fantastic. August Derleth was an American writer and anthologist. He also befriended Lovecraft and published many of his works through his company, Arkham House. Although he greatly contributed to the popularization of the author's works after his death, he is surrounded by numerous controversies. One of his most questionable decisions involved introducing the good versus evil doctrine. Derleth was a devout Catholic to the Cthulhu mythos, which contrasted with Lovecraft's view of the world and his approach to cosmic horror. As a result, the author's works are often misunderstood and misrepresented in today's culture. Oh. It is also worth noting that Lovecraft was never really interested in creating a mythology, and the term Cthulhu mythos was coined by Derleth after the author left the mortal plane. Yes, this is what I was talking about at the start. A lot of, like, when you look into discussions about Lovecraft and the Cthulhu mythos, they are actually different things, or they can be different things. So, yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you, Video Game, for presenting my research for me. The Marketer. Lovecraft's attempts to find a job in 1925 were influenced by advice he received from friends. Among others, he started freelancing for a marketing magazine, where he would write announcements and commercials. Feel free to judge his copywriting skills for yourself. From an ad for Curtis Woodwork. Curtis Woodwork embraces both the usual structural units and the cleverest contrivances of built-in or permanent furniture, such as bookcases, dressers, buffets, and cupboards. Every model is conceived and created with the purest art, ripest scholarship, and mellowest craftsmanship which energetic enterprise can command, and made to conform rigidly to the architecture of each particular type of home. The cost, considering the quality, is amazingly low, and a trademark of the individual pieces prevents any substitution by careless contractors. Yeah, we are continuing forwards after that. So, is there anything else to see? guess we're moving forwards. Scientist. These days, the word scientist is a widely accepted term, but at the time Dagon was published, it was subject to wide debate. After the author used it in the story, critics pointed out that man of science was a more appropriate term to employ. He admitted, in defense of Dagon, that if Dagon were to be reprinted, he would indeed use the term they suggested. Scientist was coined as an analogue to artist, to be used when referring to those studying different branches of science. Yet, in the 19th and early 20th century, scientific researchers in Great Britain and the United States were of the opinion that man of science, resembling the term man of letters, was the only proper choice. Among other things, it was gender-specific, indicating that science was an endeavour to be pursued by only one sex. The term scientist became more accepted only after World War II, and man of science started fading into obscurity as an old-fashioned synonym. This is actually interesting. It's interesting for a different reason. One, of course, that, Lovecraft agreed with man of science, with all of the gender-specific overtones that means. But it's interesting for another reason, which is Lovecraft made it a rather large habit, and he prided himself on the fact that he, quote-unquote, removed from his vocabulary any word that had been invented past 1800. That was very, very paraphrased, but he did deliberately make his language, the way he spoke, the way he wrote, archaic. That was a personal value and a personal source of pride for him. So the idea that he used the more modern term scientist rather than man of science is interesting unto itself. Because it's kind of like, yeah, you broke your own values and the values of today. Good work. Good work. Do we have any more? What a lovely bust. Okay, that's where the continue is. Doesn't look like there's anything else around.
It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease, and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men.
Do we have... Oh, we've got one there. Lovecraft on tobacco and alcohol. Lovecraft hated tobacco, even though he used to smoke when he was 12, in order to look and feel like an adult. In his correspondence with friend Reinhard Kleiner, he claims that he quit as soon as he started wearing long pants. He also had a very strong opinion about alcohol, as evidenced by his letters to Zelia Brown, 1928. As for the matter of drinking, I have never tasted intoxicating liquor and never intend to, having a strong aesthetic disgust at anything which blunts or coarsens the delicate natural equipoise of the evolved human intellect and imagination. Drinking excited my personal repugnance, hence I don't drink. Let the herd do what they will. I am rather in favour of prohibition, the prohibition of any one antisocial force as well as of any other, says the man who later would become supremely antisocial himself. Source, The Spirit of Revision, Lovecraft Letters to Celia Brown, etc. Do we have another one? No? No? Doesn't look like it. Alright. Time for the shocking conclusion.
Often, I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm. a mere freak of fever as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man-of-war. This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down into their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium.
That is so cool. And I do love the visual effect. Like, that is really cool.
The end is near. I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it.
If I wait here long enough, do you think it'll break through? I don't see any remaining elder signs. I hope I haven't missed any.
It shall not find me. God, that hand! The window! The window!
Elder sign? Last elder sign? No? Alright, let's go! Thank you for playing! We hope you enjoyed immersing yourself in our little pool of cosmic horror. We would appreciate it if you took a moment to rate Dagon and check out our other games and DLCs. Look, that was fantastic. That honestly was. I won't do it right this second because I'm live streaming, but I will actually leave them some feedback because that was really cool. And I hope that they've done more of this, more games like this, if not more Lovecraft like this, but more games like this, because that was really cool. I want to do it, but yeah, we'll do that later. Let's see how I did on the trivia when it loads. Any minute now. Oh, that looked hopeful. Trivia. I missed a few of them. I did miss a few of them. That is fascinating. That is not what I'm looking for. But yeah. Okay. Well, I will have to come back and do the feedback at some point. In the meantime, I think it's time that I picked a new game to play. So, we are going to stop the stream. I'm going to take a small break to make myself some coffee and decide what the next game is going to be. If anybody has any suggestions of to what Lovecraftian game they'd like me to play, please feel free to throw it at me. I'm just going to throw it on the screen at the moment. I'm trying to focus on playing some of the shorter games. So if I don't get any input, I will move on to Iron Lung. I totally misspelled that, but if I don't get any input, that will be the next one I play. But feel free to make any suggestions you wish, especially if they come from this first section, from this early part, because that is what I'm looking for. I've got a few more games that are actually on this list, actually. I've got, ooh, there, where, no. Okay, yeah, here we go. This is the one that I should have been showing you. So, Iron Lung I'll probably go for next, but some new games that I've added were No One Lives Under the Lighthouse, Give Us a Cthulhu Adventure, Quake, so on and so forth. So there's and Strange Horticulture down here. I may not do Strange Horticulture tonight, but I also have Sucker for Love, Mythos Ever After, and I have a whole lot of these games. So feel free to take a look at this. If there's any in particular you want to see me play today or tomorrow at any point in time, send me a message. Most importantly, though, a couple of these are actually multiplayer. In particular, Song of Horror. One or two others may be multiplayer as well. But if you happen to own these games and you want to play multiplayer with me, start installing them. Install them, contact me over Facebook, and we can have a game. Like, I am so up for that. But in the meantime, I will end this stream, and I will see you back in about 5-10 minutes. Farewell.